I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States.
Most people think that the talk of disclosure kind of started over, say, the last 10 years. Then there's others that think it started in the late 90s. Disclosure's actually been going on for quite a while. That clip that you saw there at the beginning, which we're going to see again expanded in just a little bit, is sort of proof of that. The idea of government hiding things from the government pertaining specifically to UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, whatever it is you want to call them, has pretty much been going on since the 1950s. Technically, it started in 1947 in Roswell, but there was a little lull there because once they put Roswell to bed, UFOs, though still being reported by people, the story kind of went away because the Air Force and the government did a great job of burying it. Wasn't until all these other high-profile sightings started happening in the 1950s that things started to change. So people that think that disclosure is going to happen soon, well, over the next however long this lasts, however many episodes it lasts, I think I'm going to prove to you that it's probably not going to happen. The actual concept of disclosure as far as a modern day term really did start in the late 90s through today. The whole disclosure project with Stephen Greer, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well, but that's essentially when the term as far as UFOs disclosure really started. Other people used it beforehand, but as far as a movement goes, it's really started then, and it's really taken off since right about 2017. And with the movie soon to be released, which we're going to talk about in just a bit, it's really taken on a life of its own, so much so that presidents are even talking about it now. And there's a reason that they're talking about it.
Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. He made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information. No, I don't have an opinion on it. I never talk about it. A lot of people do. A lot of people believe it.
Now, one thing we'll say about politicians that I think we all sort of agree with is they always lie. And I think we've all learned from Trump over the past 10 years that he definitely lies. So do we know if we're really going to get the truth at any way, shape, or form from the government? Because there's this movement going along that's stating that we are supposed to be getting disclosure from the government. Now, I'm going to put this out there right at the beginning, and a lot of people won't believe it, but I am. You hear people say all the time, I am not left or right, I'm right down the middle. I'm not left or right. I am right down the middle. Throughout my life, I have voted for both parties. There have been presidents and politicians that were Democrats that I have liked. There are politicians and presidents that were Republicans that I liked. There are times that I voted, and by the time I came to be a couple of years into it, I regretted my vote. Again, on both sides of the fence. So I don't really have a side. And I know most extreme people, I almost said MAGA, but it's not just MAGA, it's both sides. Most extreme people that are into politics on either side of the fence, whether it's liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat, they have their belief systems and they cannot believe that somebody is in the middle that doesn't really follow that credo. Well, there are a vast majority of us. You just don't choose to believe that. And when it comes to the clips like you just saw, they're turning something like this into a political game. And one thing I will say that Donald Trump does good is he plays the political game to a T. It's like, I think that's what he's still alive for. He only breathes to do stuff like that. So when this podcast came out a few weeks ago with President Obama, that's when you saw the reporter ask Trump that question. Well, here's a snippet from the Obama clip.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Now, that last question was clearly an Obama joke because on the campaign trail, his first time and his reelection, he was asked UFO questions, and he quickly diverted them with, I'd rather worry about the American people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he didn't say anything in that podcast that was disclosing top secret information like Trump insinuated. All he said was aliens are real. And I think any normal, sane human being would agree that there has to be life somewhere outside of this planet, somewhere in this vast universe. That's really all he was saying. One great thing that Obama does is he doesn't speak off the cuff very often. He is a very measured speaker, whereas Trump is a very emotional speaker. Doesn't like reading off teleprompters, kind of flies off in 50 different directions. They're polar opposites of presidents. So do I think that Obama broke some breaking news there? No, I don't. I just think he was in a podcast, and it's cool right now to be talking about aliens and disclosure, especially with the movie coming up. And I think the podcast host asked him about it, and he gave an honest answer because, honestly, we all pretty sure that there are aliens out there. Now, whether you believe they are here or have been here, that's a debate for another topic. So as far as the whole political system goes, well, we'll get into that in just a little bit. Like I said, the whole concept of disclosure recently started approximately in 2017, but recently here in 2025, 2026, it's really sort of exploded because of two things. One is the new feature film, the new Steven Spielberg movie, all about disclosure, that's due to be released in was May or June. And on top of that, a new Age of Disclosure documentary was just released a little while ago and is available on Prime and Apple TV, was even in certain theaters, really has people talking about UAP or UFO disclosure, alien disclosure.
Yes, so The Age of Disclosure is a pretty unprecedented documentary where I interview 34 high-level government, military, and intelligence officials who break their silence and reveal that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life. And on top of that, they reveal that the U.S. is actually in a high-stakes, secret Cold War race with other nations to reverse engineer technology of non-human origins. Race.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if there is a Cold War type race between countries, if there are all of these alleged crashed UFOs. It wouldn't surprise me one bit that they're all clamoring to get this technology and try to reverse engineer it and get the other hand on other countries. So
could not be higher. It's a film that answers a lot of questions for millions of people around the world, like myself. Like I grew up watching movies like E.T. and Close Encounters that piqued my curiosity and made me wonder, are we alone in the universe? Does the government really know more about this than we, the public, know? These big questions, I made the doc in pursuit of the answers to those questions.
And he gives supposition in the doc. We don't really get any answers. We get a lot of testimony. But when we get into the Dr. Greer part of this disclosure discussion in a little bit, he too has a lot of promises and information that he has and people he have talked to, because let's be honest, these whistleblowers that have all this information, they do have information, and it sounds very intriguing and it sounds very believable, but I think we all know that just flat out personal testimony isn't really provable in a court of law as far as evidence goes. Yes, you can give testimony, but, well, let me take that back. Say 40, 50 years ago, an eyewitness testimony had a lot more weight to it than in the modern age of the United States with eyewitness testimony, even more so within the UFO or UAP field, because eyewitness testimony, and we've talked about it on this podcast a lot, has gone out the window almost from the very beginning. The individuals doing the investigating for the government or the Air Force or the skeptics would always throw out the buzzword a qualified observer, meaning if somebody like you and I were to see a UFO, we're obviously mistaken because we're not a qualified observer. And to them, qualified observers were police or pilots or somebody with some sort of professional standing within the world. But here's the thing. When pilots and police started to come forward about things they have witnessed and seen, then they would get the personal attacks. So who can we really believe? So what is disclosure? Essentially, what they mean by disclosure is for the government to disclose all the information that they allegedly are keeping from us, the public, about their knowledge of the existence of aliens and the validity of the UFOs that so many of us are seeing out there. Within disclosure, when is it? Some people say that they know when it's going to happen. But as we'll get into that as we move on, people have been saying that for a very long time. But disclosure, like I said at the very beginning, isn't a new thing. It started in the 1950s. People were clamoring for the government to tell us the truth almost right from the beginning. And that is why we got.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States.
That's General John Samford from 1952. The big year within ufology. There was more sightings and reports of UFOs in 1952 just here in the United States than there has been in any other year. And like I said, people were clamoring. The public was clamoring for the Air Force and or the government to do something about it. So he came out and gave this press conference.
In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers.
There's that buzzword I told you about a few minutes ago.
Of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States.
Now, right after he gave this press conference is when Project Blue Book was formed by the Air Force, and we've talked about that on this podcast before. Matter of fact, we're in the midst of doing a mini-series about J. Allen Hynek, who was initially hired in the early 50s to work for Project Blue Book, and he came up with his Hynek scale. Close encounters of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth kind. So this is their way of sort of tamping it down in the guise of doing earnest investigation.
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States.
This is a retired major, Donald Kehoe, who, when he left the military, turned into a very popular UFO author and investigator, and was the preeminent person out there talking about the belief of flying saucers, is what they called them back then, until his death. And when the government and Project Blue Book came in to do investigations, you knew Donald Kehoe wasn't going to be very far behind.
Due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
So as you can see, the idea of disclosure isn't a thing that started in the 90s. It isn't a thing that started just 10 years ago here in the 21st century. It's been going on for darn near 70 years now. But the idea of disclosure didn't disappear after the 50s and reappear in the late 1990s. No, it had a little bit of a lull in the 1960s, though it kind of didn't, and we'll get into that on another episode when we talk about some of the biggest sightings from the 1960s. But there was a big push by the government to sort of quell it in the 1960s. It really wasn't until the 1970s and the emergence of Stanton Friedman as sort of the big-time UFO investigator that this idea started to gain a little traction.
The evidence is overwhelming that flying saucers are indeed real, that the Earth is being visited. Some of the evidence is in the form of photographs taken from all over the world of UFOs. Here's a picture taken in Salt Lake City, Utah, March 8, 1972. It's the fifth in a sequence of 7 photographs taken by a professional cameraman. We can see an enlargement of it here with a region of what I think is ionized air here and some kind of ports of one sort or another around the edge. This is March 1972. This was taken near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The moon on the left, the object on the right, 2 witnesses, another witness across the street, pictures developed by the local newspaper, judged by a UFO group to be a responsible, respectable photographer and a legitimate picture of a UFO. The biggest study ever done was or one of the larger studies, not the biggest, was the scientific study of unidentified flying objects, the Condon Report.
We'll talk a lot about the Condon Report when we go back and do our UFOs of the 60s episode.
Done at the University of Colorado. Contrary to the coverage that was given this document, 30% of the cases they looked at could not be identified. This included excellent radar visual cases, sightings by 3 astronauts which remain to be identified. This makes a very good case for UFO reality, despite press coverage to the contrary.
Now, he's got a little interview clip here that I'm going to play at the end, but Stanton Friedman was interesting because he was a highly educated man. He was a physicist who worked for some of the biggest corporations in the world as a physicist. And he gave that all up in the early 1970s because of his growing passion for UFOs and the disclosure of the validity of flying saucers and aliens. So people will say he was just an author and a lecturer out there trying to make money by doing it. No, he had a very successful job that he could have stayed at for his entire career, but he quit doing it to spend his entire time devoted to researching UFOs.
I wouldn't call them little green men. I mean, that's a notion that people use. Yes, there are hundreds of reports from all over the world from responsible, respectable people of UFOs, or Earth excursion modules, as I prefer to call them, on or near the ground, accompanied by what appear to be their pilots or passengers, however you look at it. And they're humanoid-looking creatures. That is, an arm, 2 legs, 2 head, and a body.
Now, everyone talks about disclosure now, and that's sort of the buzzword. But one thing that's interesting is Stanton Friedman was the first person to sort of talk about it, but he didn't use the phrase disclosure. He coined the phrase a cosmic Watergate pertaining to the government hiding all the information that they had about unidentified flying objects and aliens. And he's given many lectures, done great documentaries. He's done countless interviews in TV shows, written numerous books about the subject. And he isn't a flashy person. That's one of the reasons I really liked him, is because if he saw some BS, which there's a lot of BS in ufology, like there is in any field, he would call it out. People that are making these claims without a single shred of evidence, he actually was the person that went and did the dirty work, went to all of these archives, traveled all over the place to interview witnesses, did extensive research on the people and the incident that they had. So I think he was one of, if not the most credible investigator in all of ufology. So throughout the 70s and 80s, all kinds of UFO investigators, including Stanton Friedman, were coming out saying that the government knew all of this information about the existence of aliens and UFOs were real and all of that stuff. They just didn't call it disclosure. It wasn't until the late 90s when Dr. Stephen Greer created his group called the Disclosure Project, and they started to get all of these alleged whistleblowers together and having these seminars where they came on and told their stories and whatnot, but there really wasn't any response from the government. They'd get together in Washington, D.C. and have these conferences, but the government just, whatever, you guys talk about it. And one thing I will say about Stephen Greer, and I think he's done a lot of great things for ufology, is he's one of these people that throws out all of this information, whether he's doing it intentionally or not. He does it to make people think he's a lot more credible just because of the things that he has seen and he knows. If you watch any documentaries in him, I will promise you'll hear him say, well, I briefed 4 presidents and I have 200 people that have come to me with their stories about what they saw while they were in the government. They've told me they were in the know. Well, first of all, no, you didn't brief 4 presidents. You may have sent a briefing to 4 presidents, but as far as most of us know, you have never once spoken face to face with a president. You may know somebody that works for the president, and you may be calling that briefing the president, but no, you haven't. So, and you didn't really start into the UFO field until the late 1980s. Yes, I know he has claimed his sightings and everything started in the 1970s, which quite possibly is probably true. But as far as being an investigator and working for, quote, disclosure, that didn't really start until he stopped being a doctor in the late 1980s. So in a mere 10 years, he amassed all of this power somehow to brief 4 presidents and heads of state around the world. I don't know his social status. I don't know what his financial status is. And I don't really care. I'm sure if he was a wealthier man, that would probably help him get access to some of those people. But I think he is the type of person that throws out stuff like that to make it sound more credible. So that, to me, is a strike against him. And we talked on the last episode about the CE5. It could be true that some of that stuff happens, but I think a lot of it is just like your psychic readings or whatnot. It's all just a little too convenient. And we talked about the pictures they allegedly had of aliens coming through all of these vortexes and whatnot. And it's like an EVP. You tell somebody what they're going to hear in an EVP, and of course, their brain is trained to listen for that. But if you just play it and then ask them if they heard anything, chances are that they're going to say, yeah, I heard something. Let me listen to it again and see what it says. Kind of like a blind test. As far as his aliens coming through vortexes through CE5, he points out where these aliens are. So, of course, if people look close enough, they're going to say, yeah, that looks like an alien. Do I think he has the right thing in mind with disclosing all of this? Yes, I actually do. I just think that he gets a little obsessed with being the man. And why do I say that? Because now that there's sort of a different side of disclosure that isn't associated with him, he is now starting to call foul on a lot of those people because they're not in his disclosure project. Initially they were, and they've just decided to start doing their own thing, which is perfectly fine. But now that they're starting to get more attention than he gets, now he's calling them out, like Leslie Kane, the writer that broke the story of the leaked Pentagon videos that we're all so familiar with now. He claims that she stole all that information from him when we know damn well that she didn't. And there's other members that are in this new, like Lou Elizondo. He doesn't have anything good to say about him because he's just given us what we want to hear. He's doing counterintelligence, which is hilarious to me because one of his big supporters that he supports and one of his big backers, Richard Doty, is an admitted former counterintelligence operative that he admits that he worked to infiltrate people that claim to see UFOs and stuff around Area 51 and whatnot. But because he has retired now, he's coming out and telling the truth. But since he's aligned with Stephen Greer, everything he says is true. But Lou Elizondo isn't aligned with Stephen Greer, so everything he said is fake, and he's still in the know and still giving us counterintelligence. That kind of infighting does nobody any good at all. So when exactly is this alleged disclosure supposed to happen? Well, the latest buzzword, it's kind of like the whole rapture and all these preachers making the end is nigh Armageddon predictions. It happens a lot. People come out and say, we're going to find out on this date and this date and this date. Not quite as often as those, but of late, well, we'll get into that in just a second.
We'll be in shock for a little bit. There's going to be, of course, the naysayers and the fanatics, this is bad, these are demons from, Satan. In order to establish trust, you have to watch what they do. You have to see what this new race is that we're meeting. Give them a chance. They don't need to tell anyone they're here. I mean, there could be an ET in this room right now. You wouldn't even know it.
bugs me that some of these videos put such loud music behind. You can hear the people talking, but it's like the music they put behind it takes away from being able to pay attention to the guy talking.
Have come and integrated themselves in all the societies here and working as regular individuals. There's ETs washing dishes down at the restaurant, and there's ETs that are running major corporations. They're all over. And there could be an ET in this room right now.
Whoever made this clip is obsessed with that. Whenever he thinks he catches a gotcha moment, when this person is just making assertions with absolutely zero evidence. Just because he said there could be an ET in this room washing dishes doesn't mean there is.
You wouldn't even know it. They have come and integrated themselves in all the societies here and working as regular individuals. There's ETs washing dishes down at the restaurant, and there's ETs that are running major corporations. They're all over.
That's a big talk about the really deep conspiracy part of ufology. People that are huge into conspiracy theories think that the reptilians are already running this planet and stuff like that. We're not talking about that sort of disclosure. So when is disclosure going to happen? Well,
disclosure will happen. I don't know that they will do a mass landing. I think at first, like I said, it'll be in phases. First, they might start showing us their ships more closely so that they'll be literally on the 11 o'clock news. Like, this is undeniable. Look, here's a ship. This has now been photographed clearly. They're here. They will maybe show themselves for extended periods of time, hovering over an area or over the ocean or something where they're non-threatening, but we have no way of denying that that's there. Yeah. And I think eventually then it will be something along the line of some official press conference or something like that, where it's like, okay, this is what's been happening. Disclosure will happen. Here's the information. And at the end of the information, here is an ET. And they will start talking to us and start presenting their point of view as to what's happening here, to get us used to it. So again, I think they will realize they have to do it in phases that allow us time to acclimate, time to absorb what's being said, and time to absorb the understanding that they've been here all this time and what they've been doing.
I think that explanation is 100% how it's going to happen. We're not going to have a press conference where Donald Trump comes out and says, hey, guess what? Aliens are real, or some other foreign leader go in front of their public and say that. I think exactly that. We're going to get some mass sightings that are undeniable that they're happening. And kind of like the old miniseries from the 1980s, V, where all these UFOs show up over major cities around the world. So you can't just say, somebody made that up in New York City. Well, wait a minute. There's one over in London, too. There's one over Moscow. There's one over Tokyo. I think that's probably how it's going to start. They're just going to show up above us and just kind of sit there. My only fear of that was some of our governments, maybe ours included, probably ours, will probably start sending airplanes after it. And that's probably going to be a huge mistake. But there is a date that people have bandying about when disclosure is going to happen. And they all predominantly say the exact same date as far as year goes.
The consensus right now is a timeline sometime by the end of 2026. Very soon, it's imminent upon us, and early 2027. So we have been visited since the beginning of time by extraterrestrials. It is ancient. The Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Native Americans, they all left behind clues that they had been contacted, that they
That picture they just showed on the Egyptian wall where people say it's a UFO or an air or helicopter, that's long since been debunked.
had relations.
Bashar did say that there may be an over 90% probability of some kind of major UFO event at the end of 2026 or the beginning of 27.
So there you have it. And then other people that are in the know. I will say Stephen Greer hasn't given a date as far as when disclosure will be by aliens. But the other camp that he doesn't like too much is coming out with a date. Jeremy Corbell and those folks are saying they have this information that the aliens are going to, without question, make themselves known in 2027. So if you're curious when disclosure is going to be, it's going to be at the end of this year or it's going to be sometime in 2027. So down to the $1 million question. What does Dan think? Because I'm sure you all really care. Well, if you have listened or watched this podcast at any point over the previous 10 years, you know that I believe that aliens have visited and are visiting our planet. And I think they're here right now. Do I think they are working in cahoots with our government? Not ready to say that. But I think they have been checking us out. Do I think the government has shot down a bunch of UFOs and has all this technology outside of Roswell? I guess maybe, but my assumption is the only one that we really have are Roswell, which might be all we really need. Because I agree with a point that we made earlier about if there is all this off-world technology, you can bet your ass that governments around the world will be fighting to get it to get the upper hand on other nations. And that's kind of one thing that leads me against believing that aliens are actually working with the governments of the world, because there wouldn't be all this infighting like we have. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just letting us kill ourselves. What do I think about disclosure coming up at the end of this year or next year? I will believe it when I see it, because yes, I do believe the governments of the world, not just the United States, but the governments of the entire world know a lot more about the accuracy, choosing my words closely here, the accuracy of alien spacecrafts being witnessed by citizens and members of this planet. I think they know a lot more are real than they're letting on. And they are hinging on the fact that, because stop and think about it, a majority of people around the world, I think the last time I saw a poll, it was like 70% of people believed that UFOs that are seen around the world are alien spacecraft. So that means there's only 30% of people out there that don't believe they're aliens or creatures from another planet or another dimension or whatever. But the governments of the world are relying on that 30% to not get butt hurt by learning that they were completely wrong. Are they the 30% with all the power? No. But for some reason, governments seem to kowtow to them as opposed to the majority. And it's not just with ufology, it's with a lot of things. Do I think we will have disclosure anytime soon? Well, like you heard in the one clip, I think that's exactly how it's going to happen. The aliens are going to disclose themselves to us. Governments aren't going to come out and say, here you go, this is all the information we've had since 1947. Sorry we kept it from you, because they can't now. That they got to save face. I think it's going to be the aliens that just show up for everybody to see. And it's not going to be landing on the White House lawn or anything cliche like that. It'll probably be a mass sighting, a global sighting. I think that's how disclosure is going to happen. But hey, maybe you have a different opinion. If you do, let me know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to click like and subscribe so you're notified each and every time there's a new episode. And as usual, I don't have a closer for this. So I'll simply close with, and I think it's apropos, we are not alone.